We're continuing with Parsha's Vayikra. So yesterday I left you guys with a question. Do you remember what the question was? The question was in a, and it's not my question, it's the Torah's question. Rashi says, let's just go over it very quickly. And left column, in the left column, it says on page 544. So it says, the Torah says, Adam ki yakriv mikem. When a man is makriv from you, korban Hashem. The Ben Ish Chai actually says, mikem. Mikem stands for three words, mida kineged mida. Adam ki yakriv mikem. That means that a person has to bring his, when something happens in life, you should be thinking about why it's happening. We have to be very careful here because we can't necessarily know why it's happening. We can know why it might be happening because we're not prophets. Right? That's I told you I was once sitting at a table and I bit my tongue real hard. It's like sometimes you just kind of scrape it. This is like a cruncher. It's like it's one of those. And you're like and then whatever you start tearing. And you can barely talk, you can't catch your breath. And there's always somebody at the table says, "Oh, are you okay?" yeah, I'm marvelous. Yeah, I'm just marvelous. See, I have this custom that in the middle of the meal, I suddenly put my face down on my knee. No, I'm not okay. No, I'm not okay. I think you got to call out Sala. No, I'm not okay. So I said that I bit my tongue, and I'm like, and I just kind of, I was sitting there with a former friend of mine. And I just kind of gets after I went, wow, must be because of Lashon Hara. So this guy goes, well, not necessarily. It could be lying, insulting people, embarrassing people, cursing. He went through a whole list of possibilities, which is why, of course, he's a former friend. Yeah. So what happens is we have to, if something happens to somebody, let's say somebody loses a lot of money. It could be any one of several reasons. It could be a test. It could be he's gotten to such a high level that Hashem wants to take away his money so that he'll devote more time to Torah study and he'll be able to accumulate more merits for the world to come. It could be a punishment. It could be Yisurim Shlav. It could be a lot of, we don't know why. Our job, if something happens, is to ask ourselves, what could it possibly be? So it forces me to re-examine. Maybe I am insulting people. Maybe I am lying too much. Maybe if money is lost, the person has to think, maybe he's not giving enough tzedakah. And even if he thinks he's giving enough tzedakah, maybe he could give more tzedakah. So he says, that's why the pasuk says, Adam ki yakriv mikem. The person should get close to mida kineged mida, korban la Hashem, so that he gets close to Hashem. So the Ben Ish Chai says. Let's say it's certainly not the plain meaning of the pasuk. But it's certainly true as far as what our approach should be. That's what the Ben Ish Chai says. Okay? Now, let's go back to what I asked you yesterday. It's the left column of Rashi, and it's about 9 lines from the top. Miguel, you see that? Adam ki yakriv mikem. Ezra, you got that? Yeah. So Rashi says kishi yakriv when he brings it, and Rashi points out bekorbanos nedava diber ha'inyan. Korbanos nedava means volunteer offerings. So the Torah, there are all sorts of korbanos. We'll see later on the Torah talks about a chatos, which is a sin offering, which you're obligated to give. There's an asham, which is what we translate usually as a guilt offering, which you're obligated to bring. And here's a korban ola. Now, essentially, a korban ola is brought for two things. Why do you bring a korban ola? And the way it works is, just technically the way it works is a person pledges, I will bring an ola, for example. Person pledges, he takes an animal, or he takes an animal and says, this animal will be an ola in the Beis Hamikdash. He's volunteering it. It's like pledging, it's like a guy saying, I will give $20 to tzedakah. You've bound yourself now with a pledge. And that animal, once you pledge it, you got to do it. Why would you pledge it? So for the korban ola, there are generally two reasons why one should, even though you're not obligated to. Number one, inappropriate thoughts. And number two, not fulfilling a positive command. Let's say a person went a full day without putting on tefillin. There's no korban chatos for that. There's no sin offering for that, but you should bring a korban ola. You should volunteer a korban ola, okay? So it's called a volunteer offering. If you're in a good mood, you could bring a shlomim. Person did well on a test, right? Yahoo! I did well on the test, so I pledge a shlomim to the Beis Hamikdash. Okay, so you could pledge it, but the Rashi points out that the first section here is an ola. V'im ola korbano. For the bottom line says, if he's bringing a korban ola, which is a volunteer offering. So the Stipler asks, in a Torah that is so precise, and a Torah that is so regimented, you have to say Kriya Shema by a certain time. This morning, the end of Zman Kriya Shema, the later Zman Kriya Shema was 8:40. If you didn't say Kriya Shema by 8:40, tomorrow it's going to be already 9:41 because we're switching the clock tonight. So you're going to gain an hour, right? But by 8:40, you have a mitzvah saseh d'oraisa saying Kriya Shema. If you said it at 8:40, if you said it at 8:39 quickly, you fulfill the mitzvah saseh d'oraisa. If you said it at 8:41 with every kavanah of the Arizal and every Kabbalistic intent, you have not fulfilled the mitzvah saseh d'oraisa of saying Kriya Shema. You've fulfilled the mitzvah of saying, you get rewarded as if you've learned Torah, because Shema comes out of the Torah. But you've missed the mitzvah saseh d'oraisa. So the Stipler asks, a mezuzah has to be written a certain way. A Sefer Torah has to be written with precision. It has to go on, the mezuzah has to go 1/3 of the way down, and it can't be, if it's too high or it's too low, you don't fulfill the mitzvah. Everything we do is, the esrog has a black dot on an esrog, the esrog is validated. A brown dot, the esrog is okay. It's a pretty specific Torah over here. It's a pretty specific Torah. Your tefillin, I told you, cannot go past the point where the hairline ends, or once ended, as the case may be for some, right? So those of you who laugh, so the Vayikra, right? No, not laughing. No, Chas v'Shalom, not laughing. They're doing their best not to laugh, Rabbi Menashe. So why is it? So the Stipler says, why all of a sudden in such a precise Torah, all of a sudden there's room for volunteer work? What's with the volunteer work? What's with the volunteering? Either you got to bring a korban, you don't got to bring a korban. And most of the korbanos you have to bring. So what's with the volunteering? All of a sudden, okay, volunteering. By volunteering, I got enough to do. I got enough to do without. I got enough to do. Ben steak a chumash. I got enough to do with what I have to do. I've got to go down volunteer work. So Stipler says a very important principle in human nature and in Torah life. I think we've mentioned this in the past. The Stipler says, listen to this carefully. It's phenomenal. Imagine you walk into a shul. This is my example, not the Stipler's, but it's very true. You walk into a shul and you see two guys davening. One of the guys he's kind of like, first of all, he comes in late. He comes in a few minutes late. And he's kind of, you see, and it turns about, half a dozen pages, and he might check yourself. Then you got another guy who's in shul. He's there on time. He's there early. And he's davening. He's practically eating the words off of this. Right, like that. And then I tell you, one of them is an FFB, and one of them is a Baal Tshuva. And you have to bet. Where would you put your money? Yeah.
Baal Tshuva eating his words?
Yeah, the Baal Tshuva is eating chumash, right? The sitter, right? The FFB is, okay. What? What's that?
That's how you know you've made it.
That's how you know you've made it, right? I know a guy who's here is a Baal Tshuva. The telltale sign that you are officially an FFB when I see you fall asleep in a shiur. Because the Baal Tshuvas never fall asleep in shiur. And when a guy's super interested in the shiur, that means he's probably not Jewish. Right? That's usually what happens. Yeah, that's happened to me many times. They're just enchanted and fascinated, right? The Baal Tshuva is happy with it, and then the FFB, he's yawning. The yeshiva guy, he's already yawning, his head's down. He's looking at the watch. Okay, so we're being a little facetious, but not too much. Why would you say that, Ben? So why would you say that that's the Baal Tshuva? Why? You're right, and we would all agree with that. Why is that? And this is where the Stipler says the principle that many people miss. Why is that?
That the Baal Tshuva is really trying hard.
Why?
Because he didn't grow up with it.
And so why is the other guy yawning?
Because it's like a routine for him.
That's what most people say. That's what most people say. That's not the Stipler. That's true. There is a certain element of truth there, but that's not what the Stipler says underlying it. What's underlying it?
The Baal Tshuva chose it.
Right. In other words, the Gemara says, who gets more reward? Somebody who has to do a mitzvah. Let's say a man has to, we are obligated to shake a lulav on Sukkot. So a woman's not obligated. And then she shakes a lulav. Who gets more reward? The guy who had to do it or the guy who volunteered? Who gets? Right, that's what most people think. And the Gemara says the opposite. The Gemara says, Gadol ha-mitzuvah ve'osa mimisha. That's what most people intuitively, instinctively would say that. The Gemara says, Gadol ha-mitzuvah ve'osa misheino mitzuvah ve'osa. Greater is one who's commanded and obligated than one who's not. Why is that? It's a different explanation, Toso says, because he's worried about not fulfilling his obligation, just having that worry on your head. The volunteer, I could go, not go. Just last night, I was, a friend of mine, his son got married, and I was planning to go to the Yeshivat Brachas last night. I wasn't at the wedding. I wanted to go to the Yeshivat Brachas. Last year I went. He made it hit. I went all the way to the old city. I was going to go this year, and then in the end I decided, I'm learning. I'm not going to go. And I didn't feel pressure to go. If I was invited and I knew I had to be there, I would be pressured by it all day. Because when you have to, I have certain things that I have to do. A woman has the choice. That idea that the volunteer gets more tzchar, because that's what the society thinks. Oh wow, the volunteers arrived. That's all okay, which is great. I'm not knocking that's all chas v'shalom. But when you're on duty as an ambulance driver, you have this pressure. You have a certain pressure. It's psychological pressure. The Stipler says the FFB, where we think, I've been doing this by rote and everything else. What's really happening is this guy knows I have to do it. That takes the fun out of it. Whereas a Baal Tshuva, somewhere deep down inside, or maybe not so deep down inside, a guy who's 25 years old and starts embracing Judaism, in the back of his mind he's thinking, listen, nobody would blame me if I didn't do this. I wasn't raised with this. I'm doing this. I chose to do it on my own. Hashem's not going to get me if I drop this, because that's what he's thinking. So he's a volunteer, and therefore there's greater enthusiasm. At the point that he yawns, because at that point he realizes, I'm cooked if I don't do this anymore. That's how he crosses that line to be an FFB. That's what happens. The classic example, and I think that Rabbi Shapiro could relate to this very well. It's Motzei Shabbos. The wife is in the back room doing something, and the husband decides he's going to make his wife happy, and he is going to surprise her by cleaning and scrubbing the crusty cholent pots that are in the sink on Motzei Shabbos without being asked. So the husband rolls up his sleeve, and he's going to be a national hero. Now, okay, we're into science fiction now, but he's going to be a national hero. And as you walk towards the sink, you hear a voice from the back room. Honey, could you please do the dishes? What happens at that moment? You ever see the air go out of a balloon? What happened? You were going to do it anyway. So what happened? What changed? What changed is that voice. That's what changed, right? Because at that point, look, you're not a mitzvah vosa, but you are. Now I'm not volunteering anymore. That's what happens. That's the difference. The other example I give just for the ladies, imagine this wife. She can't wait. She wants to surprise her husband and bake him a lemon meringue pie for when he comes home from work. It's not his birthday. It's not the anniversary. Says, oh yeah, she's going to surprise him with his favorite, a lemon meringue pie, and she can't wait for him to leave the house. She's so buzzing with excitement. She wants him out of the house. Most women can't wait for her husband to leave the house in the morning anyway, but she's buzzing with excitement so that he'll leave so she get working on it. And he leaves, and he just as he leaves, says, well, have a great day, honey. Maybe you can make me a lemon meringue pie for tonight. Zzz, right? The lemon meringue pie. When you come home, just check for razor blades. Just kidding, Ezra. Relax. You understand why? Because now, you took the fun out of it. Why? Because you were a volunteer. So the Stipler says that when it comes to Yiddishkeit, there are certain things we have to do. Every man, I'm talking to men now. Every man has to hit certain minimums in Yiddishkeit. Have to learn a certain amount of Torah every day. We're obligated to learn some Torah by day and some Torah at night. We have to put on tefillin. We have to say Kriya Shema. Now, there are certain people, and I'm sure you've met people like this, who then devote themselves more than absolutely required. Let's call it, they specialize in certain areas. Right? Some people specialize in Torah. They're just always learning Torah. They're sitting in a beis medrash at the home. Wherever they are, they're learning Torah. You have other people who specialize in tzedakah. They're just always collecting tzedakah, involved with tzedakah. You have other people who are very meticulous in their mitzvah observant, above and beyond the letter of the law. The guy who takes 3 days to find a lulav and an esrog, and the guy who's tefillin, he's always checking and toes to the sofer to make sure that they're perfectly square. He's meticulous beyond the letter of the law. The Stipler says, the area that you choose, which is generally where you're inclined by your natural, you have a nature in a certain area where you move, that area where you're quote unquote volunteering is where you're going to make the greatest connection with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Because when you volunteer, you feel good about yourself. You feel the connection. That I said, that I put on tefillin this morning, whoopee-doo. But I helped an old lady carry her packages off the bus. Then it's basically me and the Chafetz Chaim, and there's nobody else. I can feel good about myself. I put on the tefillin. And by the way, that's why you find people who do strive in certain areas. I'm just using tchelis as an example. People want to feel, this is my mitzvah. I'm special with this mitzvah. The things that are not necessarily required. That a person wants to feel, I'm doing something above and beyond. Maybe it's mischanneled. Sometimes it's mischanneled. Sometimes a person is the biggest Baal Chesed. He forgets that he could do Chesed in his own home with his wife and children. And you know why? You know why people will not treat their family the way they should, but everybody else outside they're the nicest, sweetest tzaddik outside the home, because that's where you get the prestige. And in the home, you have to do it in the home. Nobody's giving you awards when you do the dishes. Right? Nobody. That's what the Stipler says. And he goes so far as to say it doesn't matter what area you choose. Doesn't matter. Whatever area you choose, that's where you're going to make that's where you're going to have your what do they call it? Your dveikus. Your connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Doesn't matter what area you choose. I would just add to that, I would just qualify that by saying, it doesn't matter which area you choose if that's your nature. If your nature is, I could choose devotion to Torah study, or I could choose devotion to, let's say, prayer, the davening, putting all your content. Torah always comes first. If you've got that ability to go be above and beyond, then Torah study is always number one. Talmud Torah Keneged Kulam. Not everybody's capable. Not everybody has that drive, that sort of thing. So a person has a natural drive to do chesed. So that becomes his area. But that's provided that he's hitting his minimums. Provided you're hitting your minimums. That's what it does. It's a remarkable principle, because I find that it's so true. You got a person goes into a hospital. You got nurses and you got volunteers, right? The nurses are, sometimes they're a little unpleasant, and sometimes they're running around. Just, sir, will you please wait? I'm dealing with this patient right now. The volunteers are a bunch of gum snappers who are walking around. Hey, hello, sir, can I help you? Why? Because they can walk out anytime they want. It's very true. It's very true in life, and it's very true in human relationships as well. Once you have to do it, it's not so simple. The same person who's willing to help an old man, and you see an old man walking to shul, and you help this old man, he can barely walk, and you hold his arm. Yet his own father, where he's got a mitzvah to say d'oraisa of honoring his father and helping his father, that all of a sudden becomes a drag, because there you have to, right? And this applies to many places in Torah. Okay, take a look at Pasuk Gimel. We're making a lot of progress, guys.
Hey,
Here we are on Pasuk Gimel. Yeah. Yes.
You're saying fulfill the things you have to do before the things you don't really need to do.
That's for sure in life. That's for sure in life. We always there's always the fun stuff. Everyone wants to do the fun stuff, but before you do the fun stuff, do the tough stuff. Do the stuff you have to do.
Yeah.
All right, just an advertisement very quickly for Torah Anytime. For Torah Anytime people, I have over here the Haggadah rhymes. I hope you can see that. This is called the Haggadah rhymes, and these are a set of rhymes that I've written on the Haggadah for Pesach night, because it's very difficult often to get the entire family interested with people of different ages. And so what I found with my own family was I used rhymes to introduce these. I have about 23 paragraphs from the Haggadah that are introduced with rhymes. I'll just give you an example. I'll give you one of the examples. For example, I have Kadesh, Urchatz, Karpas, Yachatz, and I just give you one example of from the text where it says by Elmar Rebbe Elazar ben Azariah, the famous story of Elazar. So over here I say Rebbe Elazar ben Azariah had a beard, but something about it was a little weird. And what happens at the Seder is people like to guess the rhyme word. And I found that the kids love it, and the adults love it even more. Right? I never saw how do you keep people interested, because you got different ages and different levels of interest in Yiddishkeit, different intellectual levels, and this I found has worked very well. So I've just given you one example. He went to sleep as usual one night. When he awoke in the morning, some had turned white. So though he was young, just 18, he said out loud, Hareani kiven shivim. Why did this happen, this little nace? Why was there a change in the hair on his? As the new Nasi, he had to speak. He gave a drasha in the Beis Medrash each
week.
So in order that his words should carry more weight, he had to look older than 10 plus 8. Okay, and so on and so forth. I'll give you one more example, the famous story of the 5 tzaddikim. 5 big tzaddikim were at the Seder. They didn't notice it getting later and later. They were all having such a good time telling the story of Yeshivat Ohr. We today can't possibly measure how much they enjoyed it. Such a pleasure. In the morning their Talmidim came and said, we know you never went to bed. You really got into telling this story, which demonstrates Hashem's honor and glory. See how good these guys are? We hate to have to ruin your fun, but it's Zman Kriyas Shema of the Magen Avram. So there are, what do you call it over here? I have 23 of these rhymes. And then what you do is, I even wrote in the introduction here that we're using this not just for the rhyme itself, but that the father or the parents could then expound on it and introduce and get everybody's attention. I found this was magnificent for my family. So if anybody is interested and you want the Haggadah rhymes, they're about 5-6 pages over here. I don't know, about 23 rhymes. If you email me at Dovid B. Kaplan, Dovid B as in baseball, Kaplan, Dovid B as in badminton, Kaplan, Dovid B as in basketball, Kaplan, at gmail.com. I will be glad to send you a copy. There's a small fee of $12, and I will give you the wiring details. You can send it, the IBAN is IL 8101 106 400. That's IL 8101 106 400. The bank account number is 0000 5915 106. 0000 5915 106. And the branch is branch 64. If you are able to wire in $12, I will send you the Haggadah rhymes as soon as you email me. If you have trouble wiring in, then whatever. But I'll survive it. But that's the cost is $12, and I'll be glad to. And I found that I've gotten feedback from people that was a game changer at their Seder. Okay, now let's go on to Puzzle Gimel. And I don't want anybody to feel any pressure to buy it. There should be no pressure to buy it. Hopefully, I'll find some other way to support my family. No pressure. Yes, for sure. There you are. Yeah, and not too deeply either. Okay, Puzzle Gimel. Im ola korbono. If his korban is an ola min habakar zachar tamim yakrivenu el pesach al meid yakrivenu l'tzono lifnei Hashem. When a person brings a korban ola, so the ola is a male korban. Is a korban ola is the volunteer offering, and the nature of the ola is that it's brought to the Beis Hamikdash, it's slaughtered, and the korban is then it is then burnt completely on the mizbeach. The kohen does not get a share of this, whereas other korbanos, the kohanim get part, they eat part. There's actually a doctor in the Beis Hamikdash on duty to treat kohanim, because kohanim were walking around barefoot and a cold marble floor. Sometimes it could be, it wasn't July all year, December, January, and they were eating they had large quantities of meat, so sometimes they had stomach trouble. So the barefoot with meat, and so that there were doctors in the Beis Hamikdash. There was actually what's called a lishkas beis hamoked in the Beis Hamikdash. There's a room with a constant fire burning, so the older kohanim could go in there and warm their feet. And I could just see the Kohen going in there, oh, that feels so good, putting up his feet in front of the fire. They didn't say it because there was no talking in the Beis Hamikdash. Yeah, there was no talking. The rabbi didn't have to bang on the stender. We will not continue with the reading until there is the talking stops. There was none of that in the Beis Hamikdash. Now this korban olah, there are a few points we want to get to. Number one, the olah was a male animal. The korban chatas, the sin offering, was a female animal. And the shlomim, which is what's called the peace offering, could be either male or female. So the commentaries explain why is that. Why was the olah a male offering? And the Mefarshim explain, I told you earlier that one of the reasons that a person would bring a korban olah is because of inappropriate thoughts. And the other is not fulfilling a positive command, which is generally there are more positive commands, especially time-bound ones for men than for women. But when it comes to thoughts, the realm of thought is the male realm. Men are the intellectual, they're focused on Torah study, and using their intellectual abilities. Chatas is for doing something wrong, which relates to action. And the women are in the world of the action. As opposed, a shlomim could be male or female, because the word shlomim obviously is called a peace offering, and the area where it means getting along with people. And one of the areas, possibly the trickiest area to try to get along with somebody, it happens to be a female. And I'm not talking about your mother or sister, right? So one of the areas of life is getting along with a female, especially Erev Pesach. I'll tell you something. I once somebody got married right before Pesach. There was a Sheva Brachas. Somebody made a Sheva Brachas about 3 days before Pesach. So I spoke at this Sheva Brachas and I said, I look at the bride and the groom, and it's a wonderful thing to see a husband and wife who are on speaking terms 3 days before Pesach. And when you're married, you appreciate that, won't you? Right? There's a lot of stress and tension in the house, especially if there are little kids running around. It's a challenging time. So the olah is the realm of the male, the intellectual process. It doesn't mean women are not intelligent, chas v'shalom, and it doesn't mean women don't think. But the area of intellectual development is the men. Remember, I've told you, a woman who knows kol ha-Torah kula, a woman who knows the entire Torah. She studied the entire Torah. She was born for knowing however she knows the entire Torah. If a woman walks into the room, you are not obligated to stand up for her because of her Torah scholarship. A man, yes. A woman, no. A woman who's married to a Torah scholar, you have an obligation to stand up for her. She parallels her husband's growth because she grows intuitively. She understands by living with him. That is what that's what affects her. The intellectual study, she's allowed to study Torah, those parts of Torah that women are allowed to study. But there is no intellectual praise for a woman for intellectual accomplishment like this for a man. He's a Talmid Chacham, he's a big Talmid Chacham, he's a massive Talmid Chacham. That doesn't exist by women. I'll get to you 1 second, Ezra. Action, even though men also have to do mitzvahs, but action is associated with the women because when you look at the male-female relationship in a marriage, for example, you have a man learning in kollel. What is his wife's job? The wife is in the home. What's she entrusted with? She's entrusted with the kashrus in the home. She's entrusted with the laws of family purity. She's entrusted with all the taking care of the physical world. Now, what that means is that the reason she's entrusted with that is because if a man does it, it's dangerous for a man. A man who's involved in the physical world, it's difficult for him to be spiritual when he's involved in this physical world. It's a challenge for a man. A woman could naturally do it without being drawn after it in an inappropriate way. Whereas a man could get involved in the physical realm, and he's got challenges all the time. So the physical realm is, as I doesn't mean men don't go to work. There are more people working men in Klal Yisrael than there are people learning in kollel. But a man has this obligation to be in the intellectual realm as well. The shlomim is both, because the shlomim represents peace. Idea number one. Yeah, Ezra, what were you going to ask?
So I understood the first part as far as not standing standing up for a woman that's like, I guess essentially like a Torah scholar, since modest. I imagine modesty, but
Not just modesty. It's because there's no. When we're standing up for a man who learns Torah, we stand up because of his Torah.
yeah,
The Torah that a woman learns, it's not something that's considered something that is essential for her. What was it like you want? So why do we stand up if she's married to a Torah scholar?
yeah,
Because a woman's growth comes about by being married. Because you see, the man is, you've heard this idea that the man is the mashpia, and the woman is the one who, the man is the energy, and the woman's the one who receives the energy. The way, for example, you have a Rebbe and a Talmud. The Rebbe gives over, the Talmud receives. How does the Talmud grow at that stage in life? By receiving. The Talmud grows by receiving. The Rebbe is giving over right now. He's the mashpia, the Talmud is the nishba. He's the one who's the mushba. He's the one, nishba, mushba, however you want to say it. He's the one who receives. The husband brings the ruchnias into the home, and the wife absorbs it. The wife absorbs the husband ruchnias. I told you, I could talk to a woman on the phone, sometimes women call up with questions. I could, within a very short time, within a minute or two, I could tell basically what her husband's level of scholarship is. Because a woman who's married to a Talmid Chacham talks and thinks like a Talmid Chacham. It's a remarkable thing. And a woman who's married to a guy who's not a Talmid Chacham, a guy who thinks like a guy in the street, that's how she talks and behaves. And you could tell from her behavior, you could tell from the tone of her voice how she talks. You could tell what her husband, not absolute, but you get an idea. This is the wife of a Talmid Chacham. Eishes chaver kechaver, as the Gemara says, the wife of a Talmid Chacham is got the status of a Talmid Chacham because that's her growth. That's how she grows. Different people grow different ways. A man could do chesed all day. He's not going to grow like a man who learns Torah. He's got a lot of mitzvahs, the best amount of mitzvahs. He's not going to grow as a person the way a man who learns Torah. He'll connection with HaKadosh Baruch will be very strong, but he's not going to grow the same way as a man who learns Torah. A woman grows by being married to the Talmid Chacham. Talmid Chacham is different in everything that he does. And if he's not different, he's not a Talmid Chacham. It's not just a question of memorizing the encyclopedia. It's a question of his behavior, his outlook, his thoughts, the way he views life, the way he approaches life. So that's where her growth. The commentaries compare it to two types of medicine. There are two types of medicines that a person takes. One type of medicine where a person has to take pills, bitter medicine, bitter pills or bitter medications. There's another type of medicine where a person has breathing trouble. You put him in a room with vapor and he breathes in the vapor. Just breathes in. So the commentaries explain that's why the girls are called Beis Yaakov. Right? You ever hear that? The Beis Yaakov. Why did you ever wonder why are the girls' schools called Beis Yaakov? Why did Sarah Shanir, who founded the movement, call it Beis Yaakov? Because the Torah, the Pasuk says, Hashem says, Ko somar leBeis Yaakov. So you shall say to the Beis Yaakov, to the women, V'saged livnei Yisrael, and you should tell over to the men. The women are placed first. The men are not called Beis Yisrael. There is a concept, but we're generally called Bnei Yisrael. The women are referred to in that, so you shall say to Beis Yaakov, the house of Yaakov. Why are the women called the house of Yaakov? The house of Yaakov. The answer is because she's in the home. Yaakov is subsidiary to the name Yisrael. Yisrael is always the higher level name. She's called Beis Yaakov. Yaakov, she's in the secondary role, meaning she's the assistant. But she's the house. A, she creates the home. B, she grows by absorbing what her husband brings into them. She breathes in the vapor. She breathes in the, that's how she grows. She grows by breathing in the vapor. That's why she's called Beis Yaakov. So a woman certainly should, a woman certainly with an intellectual bent or an academic bent, should certainly go to a shiurim and she certainly study those areas of Torah that a woman's interested in studying. But what comes first? First, make dinner for your husband. First, make sure your husband has supper. That's your obligation. First, make sure the laundry is done and the kids are clean. Then do whatever you want. And if your hobby is Torah for a woman, I say hobby in tongue in cheek. It's a much better pursuit than sitting reading Time magazine, right? But if you have that, a woman should certainly involve herself in that. And not only that, some women will be better mothers because they have that outlet for that intellectual bent. Then they have to do that. But all else is equal, that's not her primary role by any stretch of the imagination. Okay, everybody's got a different job. Somebody had a question. Jonathan, do you have a question? Okay. Number two, I want to show you something in the wording of the pasuk. Very precise in the wording. So it says, Im ola korbono, if his ola is a korban, min habakar, from the cattle, zachar tamim yakrivenu. Now look how precise this is. El pesach ol moed yakrivoso. The farthest the person could go with his korban is to the entrance of Ol Moed. Then who do you turn it over to? Turn over to the Kohen. Turn over to the Kohen. Now there's one thing that you could do. There's one thing a Yisrael could do. The Yisrael could slaughter the animal. But after that, the Kohen does everything. The skinning and the burning and everything else, that goes to the Kohen. So El Pesach Oed Moed Yakrivoso, the closest you could get is to the entrance of Ol Moed. But what about the devotion? What about the devotion that you bring with the animal? How much devotion is there? You know where that devotion goes? Lirtzono, your devotion, your ratzon, your will, lifnei Hashem. That goes all the way to the Holy of Holies before Hashem. In other words, there's not just bringing the korban. The goal isn't, I told you, the goal isn't that HaKadosh Baruch Hu needs meat. The goal is the attitude behind the korban. And you bring it, you can bring it physically as far as Ol Moed. But your ratzon goes all the way in lifnei Hashem, number one. Other commentaries say, l'ratzon lifnei Hashem, l'ratzon lifnei Hashem, alludes to the idea that only Hashem knows your ratzon. Only Hashem knows your ratzon. And I would tell you that there are two who know what your spiritual level is. Hashem and your wife. And she knows your spiritual level better than you do, by the way.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, for sure. Because we may probably tend to overestimate ourselves a little bit. Right? She sees the truth. Right? Sometimes we underestimate ourselves. Right? And she tells you, no, you're better than you think you are. But she knows who you are. That's for sure.
So it's time to get married.
And a lot of times, it's time to get married. It's always time to get married, right? But a lot of times, we don't see who we really are because the Gemara says a person sees everybody else's flaws but his own, or she sees them, right? But sometimes we're not willing to admit it there. So probably deep down, I'm convinced that deep down inside we know them. We just have such a we're so biased towards ourselves that we refuse to admit the truth to ourselves. Very hard to admit the truth to ourselves. That's one of the reasons on Yom Kippur. When we do tshuva, one of the ingredients, we have to commit ourselves not to do it in the future. We have to regret the past, and we have to say confession out loud. We have to give Hashem knows our thoughts. Why do we have to say confession out loud? It's the same reason we daven out loud. By davening, it has an effect on us. Davening out loud means it's an action that actually has an effect on us. So confessing out loud has an effect, but I think it's a little more than that. It's not just that it has an effect on us. When I confess it out loud, I'm really confronting myself with it. Before I say it out loud, so I think about it for a second, I push it away. When I say it out loud, I'm like, And a person, you can actually be embarrassed by yourself. Sometimes you cringe. Sometimes you think back at things you did when you were a teenager and you really cringe, ready to crawl into a hole, right? But the confession, sometimes we have to confess to ourselves. And that cringing, by the way, if you're embarrassed by something you did, that wipes the slate clean. The embarrassment, the sense of shame, wipes the slate clean.
Is it good to tell a friend, confess to a friend?
No, you don't confess. You don't say. It says, "Ashrei nesui avon kesui chata'a." We cover it over. We don't tell other people our sins because telling other people your sins means you're not embarrassed by it. If you're really embarrassed by it, you wouldn't be telling it over to anybody. So if you tell it over to somebody, it's like you're not. If the only person you could tell it over to is, let's say, a rabbi or somebody, because you want to get advice on how to do tshuva. So that yes. But to tell it over to somebody just for the sake of telling it over, to tell it over to a friend, that we don't do. All right.